If you're not preparing them to be technologists, you're ill-equipping them for a future that's going to mandate exactly that. Somebody went to Jeff Bezos and said, Jeff, how do we communicate more efficiently? And his response was, I don't think I want us to communicate more efficiently. I think I want us to communicate less. When do we benefit from artificial intelligence? Because it can help us to reach the world in ways that we couldn't even begin to imagine inside of ministries. But then how do we also protect the notion of we are human beings created in God's image?
Hi, welcome to the Global Missional AI podcast, where faith meets technology and where we explore how innovation can serve the kingdom of God. My name is Joshua Seal, and I serve as the Director of Global Missional AI. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Arena, who spent years at the epicenter of technological innovation. As Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Amazon Web Services, he led the organizational research team that studied the human dynamics of high-performing teams, including the development of Amazon's famous two-pizza concept. Before Amazon, he was a visiting scientist at MIT's Media Lab, working with AI pioneers like Rosalind Picard and Sandy Petland, seeing the future of AI 10 years before it emerged into the mainstream consciousness. Now, as the Dean of the Crowell School of Business at Biola University, my alma mater, Michael faces a crucial challenge. How do we educate business leaders when the fundamental nature of work is changing at an unprecedented pace? His answer is an adaptive MBA that uses generative AI to customize learning while doubling down on what makes us uniquely human, like emotional intelligence, ethical reasoning, and critical judgment. But this conversation is far more than a business strategy. Michael is developing biblical principles for AI implementation, grappling with questions many faith-based organizations face. How will we harness AI's potential while protecting human dignity? What does it mean to be created in God's image in the age of artificial intelligence? But before we begin, a quick word from our partner, Glue. Glue is the technology platform for the faith ecosystem, providing value-aligned AI and comprehensive solutions for ministry leaders. Visit gloo.com to learn more about their tools and resources. We're grateful to Glue for their partnership in enabling us to do the Global Missional AI Summit, as well as this podcast. Let's dive in with Dr. Michael Arena.
I'm Dr. Michael Arena. I'm the Dean of the Crowell School of Business. Been there for about 18 months. So real privileged to be living in the academic world. I've always bridged back and forth between academia and the business world. So I was Vice President of Talent Management, Talent Development at AWS for a number of years, Chief Talent Officer at General Motors for a number of years, but also spent some time in places like MIT and teaching at Penn. So now I'm in my happy space where I'm in a business school, working with corporations, working with businesses, but also working with students on a day-to-day basis.
Dr. Michael, you've got a fantastic long history in the world of technology, mostly not in your current space of academia, but in an illustrious career in places like Amazon. Just tell us a little bit about how that has shaped your current thinking on the world of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around AI for quite some time. I was up at MIT as a visiting scientist in the Media Lab for a couple of years, and seeing the future, 10 years prior to the future emerging, and looking at things like effective computing with Roz Picard, and doing a lot of work with network dynamics and machine learning with Sandy Petland. And then obviously at Amazon, that at scale, right, and that in production. So I think technology is just, how do I want to position this? I mean, I think it's just ubiquitous. Like it's here, it's behind, it's under, it's on top of everything that we do. Yeah. And now in my current role, preparing future business leaders, if you're not preparing them to be technologists, at least junior technologists along that journey, you're ill-equipping them for a future that's going to mandate exactly that.
Well, I mean, let's talk about what those skills of the future maybe look like. At Biola, you've got a new adaptive MBA program you guys are building out. which will use generative AI in shaping people's individual needs and skills. Maybe just tell us a little bit about why it has to be done that way in the future.
I think education is poised for some major disruption. Now, I know a number of people have been saying that for years, but it is quite antiquated in the way that we do education. There are parts of it that need to remain, the Socratic method, the ability to do critical thinking, ethical judgments. But there's part of it, the knowledge part of it in particular, that AI is going to just completely redesign. So in this new adaptive MBA, we're thinking about those two dualities. Like, how do you double down on the human-centric skills? So for us, that's things like emotional intelligence, social navigation, working in teams, adaptive leadership, ethical reasoning, critical judgment, critical thinking. And those are behaviors and leadership traits and skills that I oftentimes say are caught, not taught. So you got to model them. You got to engage in face-to-face interactions and challenge students and leaders, even in the corporate world, to be thinking, around problem sets or grand challenges, ethical dilemmas. Now, on the other hand, I used to say, go get a software development degree. I used to say,
of course.
when I was at Amazon, right, our biggest deficit in being able to keep up with customer demand was SDE, software development engineer capacity. That's changed, right? That's changed quite a bit. So those more technical skills, I still think you need to understand the basics. Just like accounting principles. If you don't understand accounting principles, you can never have critical thinking or ethical judgment about when and when not to dive deeper into an auditing activity. And same thing with coding, right? You need to understand the basics of it. But the higher order things, we can learn that through the LLMs. And so what we're doing is trying to create an environment, disrupt education that goes really, really deep into these, what we call human-centric skills, and then goes as fast as the learner needs to go on those other things that they can learn online through, sort of adaptive LMS systems and so on.
I mean, obviously, MBA, often for those that are already some way along in their own career, they've already maybe had those early years, for many at least, or they've gone on from further study. Yeah. When you think more at those entering into the career path in the next 5 years, how do you see the role of junior roles being reshaped when it comes to AI? This is my own personal fascination, as you know, that I think we are in for a really difficult time maybe in the next few years as it becomes economically unviable for some of the more junior jobs to be done by people and AIs come in. How are you thinking about those that maybe are just getting started in their career? I mean, what would you be even advising to an undergrad software engineer right now?
We've got to bring those experiences closer to the students first and foremost. Okay. Like, you can't wait until you're in business to operate like a business leader.
Yeah.
But
what does that look like, though?
To your point, like, it's going to be harder to, find your way in the front door. You're not going to have the same skills as many middle managers that got 5-10 years worth of experience. So you're going to have to start that process sooner. So we're bringing businesses, now from an education standpoint, we're bringing businesses into the curriculum. We're bringing business challenges into the program. We're even starting to think about how do we create career pathing, not just to jobs, but to organizations.
I see. Okay.
So that's on the sort of educational side, and how do we disrupt education. From a business standpoint, I think time will tell whether or not we, become more junior or less junior. I think there's a counter argument to say that the pyramid is going to begin to sort of level off, and the bottom of the pyramid certainly is going to shrink. We know that. But will that mean that more junior people are squeezed up into middle management sooner because, cheaper labor costs and, greater efficiencies and all those types of things? So I think it plays both ways. I think you'll see a juniorification where there'll be actually more junior people who probably have a better adept understanding of AI. So I'm not quite convinced yet that the frontline entry level jobs are going to go away.
Right.
I actually think that there could be a competitive advantage for these people that are starting new, where the risk, however, and I think this is your point, is the seasoned veteran that has high critical judgment and substantive knowledge of what's happening in the business. We risk losing that.
Right.
So I think this blend of both junior and
Yeah.
senior is going to be pretty interesting over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about your previous role in places like Amazon, you were in that kind of people management function, right? Maybe just give the audience a bit of context to what type of role you were doing as you kind of came out of the organization.
We talked a lot about technology. My background is really in human dynamics. So I've studied networks and how people come together. So I ran the talent organization there. So I was vice president of talent and development for AWS. And that also included an organizational research team. So I managed all the executive recruiting and succession planning, all those types of things, org design.
Yeah.
But the fun part was we had this org research team that was studying, what happens whenever you remove a layer of an organization, or what happens when you change spans of control,
spans and depths and all this stuff.
And then different types of teams. Some teams are like two pizza teams that are really moving fast with development, and other teams are bridging teams that are trying to garner new insights and work with the customer. And it's kind of those dynamics that I've spent most of my career really digging deep into.
You used a very Amazon phrase there, the two pizza team. This is one of, I know, Jeff's favorite things, and it's one of the things that I've taken on and tried to run in our own organizations. Just explain the concept of what the two pizza team is.
A little bit of the background on it first, because the background's just as fascinating as the concept. Yes, at one point in time, the legend within Amazon is that somebody went to Jeff Bezos and said, Jeff, how do we communicate more efficiently? And his, sort of counterintuitive response, which often happened there, was, I don't think I want us to communicate more efficiently. I think I want us to communicate less.
Interesting.
And it's like, so that's a pivot that changes the way you think. And his notion was, if you focus on smaller groups that are, singularly focused, so the other concept is single-threaded leaders, singly focused on one dimension, you don't have to create work about work. Asana often says that most of our time is focused on 65% of our time is work about work, not the actual value added work. So if you're a software development team, the concept is if you've got 5 people working together to build out the next feature set or the next product, 5 or 6 people, it only takes 2 pizzas to feed them for lunch. And that's kind of the ideal size because they're all locked in. They're synchronized with each other. They don't spend a lot of time talking about programs and project management. They just engage in the work, and then very naturally, as we would in small teams, sort of connect with one another.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about the two pizza rule, that it matters who the people are depending on how big the pizza is. For me, it's often not a very big team if there are 2 pizzas for me. Maybe that's just my own problem.
I oftentimes say that. Yeah, if you got a very hungry person, you got a really small team.
Yeah, that's right. But I suppose why I bring that one up, and I think it's a fascinating concept, is that those teams now could naturally get smaller. I think of the work of the late David Graeber, his kind of insights into this space, probably better title for this book, but the BS Jobs book, I'll call it, and his findings around how much time we spend in meetings, and the economic argument for reducing that time, which is often the work about the work. It's often the administration, the meeting that should have been the email that should have been the Slack message that should have probably never been sent in the first place, these types of things. AI seems to be the opportunity to begin to remove a lot of that work about the work, the agentic future and the automation. Do you think that we will see, particularly for our ministry colleagues and for those that are in developing tools for the faith ecosystem, do you think there's something that they can learn there about that future from both the principle and also from the technology side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I think about this, we just wrote a paper on this. When I think about it, a 2 pizza team doesn't work for everything.
Right.
And it's really important, to share with the audience that it's really good for moving fast, accelerating with speed. and frankly, doing bold innovation. There's lots of research out there that says that smaller teams think more boldly.
Yeah.
And if you want positive disruption or
Yeah.
bold innovation, go small. On the downside, you've got to have stability. So I think of it as the paper we just wrote is speed, stability, continuum. So if I could share with those in ministry, building out tech solutions, you got to constantly be thinking about, where do I want to go fast? Where do I need velocity? Where do I need to be building new things? And I think that pace is about ready to accelerate because agents become part of that equation,
Yeah.
and it may actually be a one pizza team
Okay.
because robots
Yeah.
don't eat.
Yeah. At least not right now.
Right, not yet, not yet.
Yeah,
we
might need them
we
to
haven't taught
kind
that.
of feel part of the team, but yeah.
So like you can imagine, like there's this world where there are a bunch of one pizza teams moving really fast on feature sets, but you got to stabilize that, and you got to mitigate the risk, and so. There are certain things that a two pizza team shouldn't do, and these central teams, much larger, bigger operational teams with cross-functional groups like risk management and lawyers and human resources in the corporate world, but certainly the various ministry leaders inside of a church. They need to look at all those implications, which oftentimes the developers don't. Right, the developers ask a question. Can this be done? But then you've got to think about, how do you harden that, and should it be done, and how should it be done? And those are sort of the broader sets. And so that's where you balance speed with stability and get sort of the benefit of both.
I love that, and I think so. If speed means go smaller, go faster, the AI technology comes in to help. On the stability end, how do we do stability without kind of falling into consensus thinking? Because I think Amazon is well known for its ways of working, kind of getting consensus around ideas. Often this famous 6-pager methodology is well known, or PR FAQs, the act of writing a press release about a project before it's even been initiated, is a way of building consensus and getting people around ideas. But for those in smaller organizations, or maybe without that structure, how do you fight that kind of groupthink issue that maybe comes along?
Yeah, I think groupthink, sometimes we will call it social cohesion in the network, is a real danger, because it may, you do need to slow down to ensure that you've considered all these different aspects, but you don't need to slow down to the point where you don't release something. Right. And so it's that tension, that balance. Amazon does some really brilliant things there as well. There's this notion of a one-way, two-way door decision. And, one-way door decision is, if we make this decision, we can never reverse it because it's created, either adverse harm or, future benefit expectations from customers, from policy, makers, whatever. And a two-way door decision is like, we can try this, we can put it in the market, and if it fails, like, we can reverse it tomorrow. So I think I actually like what W.L. Gore and Associates does as well. They basically ask the question, are you drilling? Everything's a boating analogy at W.L. and Gore Associates. But they ask the question, are you drilling below the waterline or above the waterline?
Right.
And if you're drilling below the waterline, you better slow down and get consensus. And it's probably worth taking the time, because the detrimental impact could be so enormous. If you're not, like, run or row, I guess, in that case. So I think ministries could learn a lot from the way businesses think about decision-making mechanisms. And consensus is necessary in certain cases if there's a lot of dangerous effect or potential risk, or if it's going to radically shift a ministry's vision or a business's vision. So that so I don't think it's just about team structures. That's one dimension. It's also about decision authorities and decision structures and intent and purpose and all those types of things.
And often the way that we guide these things is by having really clear principles.
Yes.
Again, the learning from the Amazon kind of leadership principles, you spent a long time thinking through those. But they've remained relatively static, is my understanding, over the years since the time that the leadership pointed those out. But in a world where artificial intelligence comes in, and we have this, what Moloch and team might call it, the cybernetic teammate kind of joining the orchestration, Do we need to rethink what it means to lead in the age of AI and what those principles look like?
The short answer is absolutely.
Okay.
I don't think any of us, I don't think you and I could sit here. We both have opinions. In some
Maybe
cases,
some.
in some cases, they're pretty strong.
Yeah.
But we could equally be as wrong with our opinions, 2 years out, 5 years out, because the world's changing so fast. So as the velocity of the outside world picks up, the velocity of the inside world of a ministry and or organization needs to also be enhanced.
Yeah.
You don't do that through top-down, hierarchical, bureaucratic policies and leadership. You have to do that through principles.
Absolutely.
So I'm a very strong proponent that organizations need to be both bottoms up and top down. Leaders matter immensely. Leaders still do tie breaks and make ultimate decisions and align and assign resources. But the people closest to the front lines know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So why I love the principles, the leadership principles in particular at Amazon and many other organizations have similar types of approaches, is there is no one right way.
Yeah.
All they're really doing is trying to force high judgment, quick local decisions, and frankly, if you read the now 14 principles, which haven't changed much, two have been added more recently, but if you actually read them, they're in conflict with one another. Like, I'll give you a real example. Think big is be bold, like innovate fast, and dive deep. That's another principle, which is you ought to be maniacally into the details. And like, to me, like, just on the notion of hearing those two things, those are in deep conflict with one another, because you want me to be big and bold and disrupt, and yet in the next minute you want me to be able to dive deep into the details of an implementation strategy. And those are like two different brain motions. But the reality is the tension across those two force you to think big, but not be so disruptive that you're doing something catastrophic.
Yes.
But also force you as a leader to be close enough to the details to know that what you're thinking can be executed upon. So it's those tension. The best way I've heard it articulated, this was Andy Jassy's comment, is that the principles are in constant tension with one another.
Yes.
It's a system of principles, and there is no one right way. But the judgment of going through those is super important for creating a higher order, third way of thinking that you wouldn't enter into a discussion with.
I mean, they raise the point of principles because I think articulating them really well and really clearly is so important, particularly in a world that is moving fast and is changing, because it can feel disruptive. I think of obviously the work at Amazon. One of the books that's had a major impact on the way in which I've thought about leadership is Ray Dalio's Principles book, and all that he's done in terms of laying out at Bridgewater their methodology, which is one of radical transparency, maybe to a fault that you might argue at times. But we need principles as an anchoring way of being able to navigate, turbulent times. Artificial intelligence is raising questions for ministries, for organizations, startups, about what it means to work and live in this time. And I know that we've been doing some work together on this idea of what might it look like for some principles around Christian artificial intelligence. You just want to tell the audience a little bit about why that work is important.
The other add-on to principles, and then I'll dive deep into that work, is they're incredibly freeing as well. So I oftentimes think of the way principles work is it's where top-down strategy collides with bottoms-up energy. So if you're thinking about all the things you can and cannot do because of the bureaucracy and what 3 layers up in an institution or ministry are thinking, then what you do is you're operating from a defensive posture. The principles free you to dive deep in and to start executing on the work. And then the tension is if that work doesn't align with the top-down strategy, then it's the wrong mission. It's the wrong thing to be doing. So I think about that a lot with AI and the faith-based world. We've got a constant, so the project you've been very engaged in at JP is to start to think about some biblical principles that force us to, again, think about these tensions that exist biblically and from a human being standpoint, uniquely created in God's image, and artificial intelligence. So like, when do we benefit from artificial intelligence? Because it's such an enabler, and it can help us to scale and reach the world with things in ways that we couldn't even begin to imagine inside of ministries. But then, how do we also protect the notion of we are human beings created in God's image? So so we've been on this journey together with some others, where we've outlined at this point in time 7 principles, and those 7 principles are about what does it really mean to be created in God's image, and what are some value statements that any ministry leader could evaluate an AI implementation through, and know that we're still maintaining and abiding by our Creator's making of who we are. And so those include things like what does it mean to be creative, not just in the outputs, but in the inner experience that you and I have as we're building something new? Or what does it mean to be relational? The Trinity itself is a relational set of beings, and we're called to be in community. You could imagine a day where artificial intelligence truncates that, right? Where I'm talking to my agents, and I'm not sitting here. I'm talking to the JP bot right now, and
this is real, by the way,
not JP. And like, we should never let that happen. Or there are cases where we should never let that happen, because it truncates, it truncates the biblical principles of we're called to be in fellowship. So that's the journey we're on, and we're trying to orchestrate these things much in the same way of these management principles I was talking before, but very much along the lines of how to practice AI and still be fiercely anchored into God's word.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're excited to continue that work together. And if you're interested in getting involved with that work through the work that Glue is doing, through the flourishing work, as well as also the broader work that's going on with the principles, there'll be information in the show notes for you to be able to check that out. But for now, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And we wish you all the best in continuing to build out the future of what it means to learn in the AI space. It's very exciting. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Enjoyed it. Thanks, JP.